Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is Lionel Ketchian, and I'm here with George Ortega. And we're here to talk about happiness because, as you know, happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about happiness and self-esteem. George, it seems we're always with ourselves. Can't be, that's an irrefutable fact, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to like ourselves. You know, throughout our day, we're with other people, or doing other things, we're in other places. You know, our day has a lot of variety in terms of where we are with and with whom. But one fact that follows us throughout every moment of our existence is that we're constantly with ourselves, and that's probably the most important reason why it's so very important to like ourselves, to be as happy as possible.
Yeah, like the name of the book by I forgot the name of the author, but Zen, wherever you go, there you are. By I forgot his name, but it seems that, you know, we're always trying to go places, but we're always there along for the ride, so we can't ever go anywhere far enough where we've left ourselves behind. And maybe that's what some of us are trying to do.
Oh yeah, and remember, you know, self-esteem, you know, esteem is about liking, okay? That means, like, you know, we're liking ourselves, and we've got to remember that happiness, when you think about it, is about liking. You know, finding pleasure in life is about liking what's happening, liking how we feel, you know, liking just choosing to like. So like, you know, so the connection with self-esteem is that, yeah, it's that we have an evaluation that we have of ourselves that changes, you know, from moment to moment, from day to day, but the more we strive to make sure that that evaluation has us like ourselves as much as possible, the happier we're going to be.
Do you think it's possible, George, to disagree with something without being disagreeable?
Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time.
Okay,
Wait, are you kidding? Anytime anybody asks me, you know, well, what's important in life? They might say, success, fame, power. No, it's money. It's money. It's happiness. But yeah, no. As a matter of fact, our politics, our whole civilization could be so much improved by our learning how to disagree in a civilized and respectful manner.
Okay, so the problem isn't the disagreement; it's the attitude and the nature in which it's the disagreeableness, or it's the degree of disagreeability that we seem to escalate to. Like, actually, you know, violence is a state of that. In fact, you know, there was a story. Hunting season just opened, and this story is, I don't know if you heard about it, but one hunter took the spot in a no trespassing area, private property of other hunters, you know, to shoot deer. They told him to leave because it was their spot. So he took the telescopic lens off his rifle, and he proceeded to shoot 6 hunters. There's 6 hunters that are dead as a result of this. This is an unbelievable story. I mean,
all right, wait a minute. How's this connected with self-esteem?
Disagreeableness.
Right.
In other words, the ability not to agree in a disagreeable nature. They could have had a disagreement without all that disagreeableness. It was the unhappiness that led to the violence.
Okay,
that's the point.
Right, and the idea is, like, the more we like ourselves, the more we're pleased with ourselves, and the happier we are. And so that, like, whether the hunters or not are infringing upon our turf or whatever, it just isn't important.
Right. I mean, we have the right to disagree with people. You and I could disagree, for example, and on occasion, I don't recall too many, but yes, we've maybe disagreed. But we don't do it in a disagreeable nature, with a disagreeable attitude, with an attitude of unhappiness, for example. We do it more of, okay, that's your point of view, maybe what I try to do is see your point of view, step over the line, try and understand.
All right, yeah, let's key in on self-esteem though, because another reason why self-esteem is so important is because there are different aspects of our life, of ourselves, that affect our happiness. Okay, self-esteem is one of the 4 personality traits that has been correlated most closely to happiness. The other 4 are optimism, extroversion, and feeling that we have a sense of control over what happens in our lives. So it's like one of the top 4 personality traits. And so that means, if we're going to develop ourselves as people, sure, we have different qualities we can develop. We can develop our sense of confidence, our sense of appreciation. There are many things that are very valuable in terms of our goodness and in terms of our happiness. But, considering the self-esteem is so vital to our happiness, one of the 4 personality traits, again, most correlated, it just makes a lot of sense to devote a good substantial amount of our time and energy on really developing it and liking ourselves as much as possible.
Would you consider that these 4 personality traits or strengths are equally important, or do you think one might be more important than the other?
That's a good question. I haven't looked into that research that specifically yet. I would imagine that self-esteem is probably more important than the others for 2 reasons. One, the first, that we are always with ourselves. That, if there's something that it's crucial to like and to like a lot, it is ourselves for that fact. And the other reason involves our motivations. We have intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, reasons why we do things. We may do things that please us on their own inherently. We may do things like to please others, to gain admiration. And a lot of with both of these kinds of motivations, really, a lot of it is about self-esteem. In other words, a lot of times we're spending time making money, gaining fame, power, prestige, in order to please others. Why? So that we could feel good about ourselves.
Right.
So I think self-esteem is probably, perhaps, again, I can't be certain about this, but I think it may actually be the most important.
Yeah, and I always felt that happiness was the best thing you could do to improve your self-esteem, that happiness and self-esteem to me are synonymous. But now that we're examining and understanding it better for ourselves, maybe the viewers will understand it as well. I think when you say that liking yourself is important, here's another reason, and it's almost a direct advantage, other than trying to make other people like us by trying to make them happy or do things, or get rich or get famous so that then people will like us. Isn't it so much better to like ourselves first? Because if you like yourself, then it's actually easier for others to like you. Because if you don't like yourself, the chances are other people aren't going to say, "Oh, I know you think that you're a miserable son of a gun, but I like you anyway." It's not going to happen like that. If you like yourself, you send that message out, and like a magnet, you sort of are an attractive force for others to tune in on that and say, well, if he likes himself, I like him too. I mean, there's some quality about him that's likable. And if it doesn't start off with yourself, I think somebody said that, and I don't remember, something with permission to, nobody can give you self-respect without you having respect. We look for respect, but yet we don't give it to ourselves. And I think this is a matter of respect as well. Right,
and it also goes the other way. Liking ourselves can definitely help others to like us, because as you say, we kind of express that appreciation of ourselves that others pick up on. But when you think about it, the more we like ourselves, the better we get at liking, okay? And again, liking is so important. So we can translate that knowledge into liking other people, into liking what we do, where we are, how we're doing whatever we're doing. So really liking ourselves is a great training ground in just learning to get better at liking in general, and that'll spread out across our whole lives.
All right, I have a question for you. I've been trying to get healthier, so I don't belong to a gym, although I do some walking. But one of the things I started doing was raking leaves. And I got to tell you that when I first started doing it, I didn't particularly like it, okay? But as you know, leaves keep falling off the trees. So as I did it more and more, I actually got to liking it and even looking forward to it, because one, I realized it was exercise, it felt good, I was out in nature. I started to see all of the advantages to it. But it all started off with me not actually liking it. So explain this to me. Does doing something even when you don't like it, and you can, let's say, be persistent at it, and then how come all of a sudden you start liking it?
All right, I don't know. There are different. Well, I mean, we can really choose to like things. We can choose to kind of like focus on the positive aspects of things. To like, but I'm going to return this back to the self-esteem.
Okay, let's go back there.
All right, because like another, I mean, we did not create ourselves. I mean, we come into this. We're born into this world. You know, we're created by God or nature, whatever. We're born to whomever parents we're born to, wherever we're born,
right.
And the experiences that we grow through, that we go through. That mold our personalities are really experiences that we don't choose. So we end up having a lot of positive qualities, right? But also a lot of things that we don't like about ourselves. Faults. I mean, we're like, I think the best definition for probably being human is like to have faults. I mean, that's, you know, we're human beings. I don't know if that's the best definition, but the idea is like, so much of liking ourselves is saying to ourselves, yes, I have faults, we all have faults, but, you know, I can still like myself a lot. We can all still like ourselves despite whatever faults we have. As a matter of fact, when I was like studying Orthodox Judaism, it was an actual obligation. Even the worst criminal in the world has an obligation to consider themselves a good person and to like themselves. Why? Because like when we consider ourselves not good, or when we don't like ourselves, we expect less of ourselves. We kind of like just minimize our importance and don't consider ourselves significant in our lives. Whereas to the extent that we like ourselves, we become happier, and we expect ourselves to reflect that, you know, in whatever we do and how we interact with people.
You know, I don't know if I'm going off the topic again, but I think as you're talking about this, as we respect ourselves more, I think we demand less from others. I think it's when we don't respect ourselves that we're always taking it out on others. You think that's true?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, like the happier we are, regardless of how our happiness comes. I mean, our happiness can come from, not from our self-esteem. Actually, there's another point I wanted to bring up. The idea that happiness, even though self-esteem can be a great way to become happier, we don't have to like ourselves to be very happy. In other words, because think about it. I mean, let's say for some reason we're raised in an environment where we just, you know, our parents maybe didn't like us much, our friends don't like us, we end up not liking ourselves, all right, whatever reasons. So what's the answer to that? The answer is to simply not focus on ourselves. There's a positive self-absorption and there's a negative self-absorption. If we don't happen to like ourselves that much, just like if we don't happen to like certain aspects of our life, we can choose not to dwell on that. We can just like say, hey, I may not like myself that much, but I love life and I love other people, you know.
Well, George, you really bring up a number of important topics all of a sudden, because for one thing, perfectionists maybe do a good job on the outside. They look great, you know, their hair's in place, they're perfect weight and everything, got a good job. But yet on the inside, there's, you know, molded jelly running around, and they don't have any center to them, because they're always looking at their own inadequacies, and they're always pointing out one feature or another that they feel is just not good enough. And it's not a way to be happy, and it's not a way to live life. So I think self-esteem helps us in doing the things you just said. For example, if you do find something that is not perfect in you, so don't focus on it. You know, look at the things that are good. That's one. The other thing you said that I think is really something I like talking about. We won't today, but I'll mention it. Is diminishing your own self-importance. I love that. In other words, here we are, but that's fine. Here you are. Here we are together, not just me. And I think that's important. Is part of self-esteem is embracing the other person as a self too, as a human being, and not giving all the importance to ourselves.
And Lionel, that is important, self-esteem, because what happens is if we consider ourselves too important, we're setting the bar pretty high for us. And one of the things that I think helps us to like ourselves a lot is to be humble, to just like ourselves, not because of what we can do, not because of any kind of qualities that we have, simply because it's wise and it feels good and it's right to like ourselves a lot. So again, you know, when we kind of like consider ourselves too important, that's creating a kind of like a, you know, it's creating a goal that we may not be able to reach. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, and also, you know, the idea about accepting our faults, it also relates to other people in the sense that as we get better in liking ourselves, we like other people better, right? We like whatever we do better. But also, as we get better at accepting our faults, that too will translate into like allowing us to really just accept other people. No, we're not perfect. The world, I mean, there are so many problems in the world. Just turn on the news. I mean, there's problems all the time. And so the better that we get at accepting our faults, the better we can say to ourselves, yes, the world has so many problems in so many areas, everywhere, but it's just not important. I mean, it's like we'll work to try to make them better, but they don't in any way have to impinge upon our liking ourselves, our liking our world, or being very, very happy.
You know, you might just be saying, don't take things personally.
Yeah, I mean that's one way to look at it, sure.
Because then, you know, you don't get all wrapped up with yourself and, you know, come out a reaction about things. So what else can we talk about with self-esteem? Where are the other benefits to self-esteem?
Okay, well, no, I think, like, you know, the benefits, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to self-esteem in terms of, like, you know, when we like ourselves, we can do things better and all, but I really want to link this totally, you know, very strongly to happiness. Basically, the idea is, like, a lot of times, again, returning to that, to the fact that we can sometimes grow up in an environment where other people are defining who we are. Our parents don't like us, so we don't like ourselves. Our friends, so I think a major part of becoming an adult, of just finding happiness in the world as an adult, is that we have to redefine ourselves if we have to. If our early childhood, if our early development had us define ourselves based on other people's views of us, and these views weren't perhaps very positive, it's an obligation, it's very important that we redefine ourselves, because, like, you know, the same kinds of people, the same kinds of reasons why our parents or our friends may not have liked us, may be reasons that we may not like ourselves, but again, they're just not important. You know, I mean, every person, I think, you know, there are inalienable rights in this world, and I think a right to really like who we are, I think, is one of them. I mean, you know, again, even for the most criminal person, you know, liking oneself is so important because it motivates ourselves to expect more of ourselves. It makes us happier, and it just kind of like drives us in the right direction.
Yeah, as you're talking about this, I realized something else. You know, you brought this up in your discussion, and it's like what other people think of us, and you're running down our histories, as all of us have this, you know, our upbringing, our families, our parents and teachers. But when it comes to parents, imagine if they don't have self-esteem, if they weren't, and let's face it, who's got perfect self-esteem? If they didn't grow up with self-esteem and they instilled maybe the wrong attitudes in us, or the wrong, you know, we grew up with making the wrong choices, having the wrong reactions. We learned the wrong thing from our parents because this is all we knew. So it's sort of been passed down to us, not to do the best thing for us, because we've learned it, you know, in the wrong way from our parents because they didn't know any better. So I think that this is a good thing to focus on, because very few people, and even teachers, don't really teach self-esteem. They just want to teach math, not self-esteem, for example. I mean, hopefully in school today they've gotten around a little bit towards self-esteem, but there's certain programs that need to be dealt with. But self-esteem is not being addressed, and I think that's a cause of violence and problems and peer pressure and for kids.
Oh yeah. I wanted to address the issue of what we think and what we do, because, you know, again, we're with ourselves all the time, and during that time we're always thinking thoughts and we're always doing things. And when you think about it, what we think and what we do really determines who we are. our thoughts, that's who we are, the kinds of thoughts we have, the kinds of things we do. So that's why it's very important to kind of like to understand, what are we thinking? Are we thinking positive thoughts that are good, that are helpful to our happiness, to the happiness of others, that are that we consider significant? Are the things we do just leading to our greater happiness and the happiness of others? And to the extent that we have that kind of focus, that we can basically choose our thoughts and choose to do what we do. For example, the happiest people in the world, much more than less happy people, spend their days doing what they like to do. So I mean, if we have a choice, after work or whatever, on weekends, if we have a choice, it really makes a lot of sense to do those kinds of things that we really like to do, because that's going to reflect on our self-esteem and happiness. That's going to, the more pleasure we get from our activities, the more we will like ourselves in the process, and the more the happier we'll become.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that developing the ability to do what you like works, and I think happy people also broaden the things that they like. Like I said, with raking, when I first started, I didn't particularly like it, but I developed actually a liking to it. And I think when you're happy, you can open up to more of these things. In other words, develop a liking to something rather than a dislike. Because as soon as you've got a dislike to it, you're in opposition with it, which is a big problem, because then if you've got to do something you don't like and you're mad about it, your self-esteem isn't going to be the greatest. So it goes hand in hand. It works for you to like what you're doing, if you've got to do it, than it does to do something in a distasteful way. And I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. One thing about self-esteem is that basically, a lot of times, like you were saying before, we'll go through school and they'll teach us math and science and history and philosophy and God knows what else, but they never teach us about ourselves. They never really teach us who we are. Who we are as people. And so a lot of us go through our lives not perhaps being able to like ourselves as much as we could, because a lot of us don't know who we are. What do we value most in life? What kinds of people do we enjoy the most? What kinds of things do we like doing? These things, it seems as like with happiness. Happiness is so obvious. It's basically our most important part of life, but we're like only marginally happy as a world, and so it doesn't make sense that something so obvious should evade us. It's the same with self-esteem. It makes sense that we should really know who we are, but we don't. So like with schools, with just like our media, our culture, we should really try to promote that concept that the better we know ourselves, the better we know who we are, the better we can appreciate ourselves, because we have to know ourselves well in order to appreciate ourselves.
Well, part of knowing who we are is our relationship with others. I mean, let's face it, the more balanced someone is, we would say, is a person who's effective at dealing with other people. Okay? I don't mean using other people, I mean interacting with others. And one of the greatest things about self-esteem, I think, is that if you really come out of self-esteem, when you care about yourself, when you're there for yourself, as you say, we're with ourselves all the time, but when you're really there for yourself, one of the things that happens is that I think a person like that, who's got self-esteem, who's got happiness, has a greater ability to do good, because they feel good doing good for others. It actually makes them feel good. Because they're in touch with a feeling of goodness within them, they could give some of that out. And I think it's the person who has low self-esteem or no self-esteem who could care less about others because they're hurting. So they're not in a position to do good for others.
Right, and it's interesting because, again, a lot of times these kinds of correlations are bicausal. In other words, we can like ourselves more by doing good for others, but also as we like ourselves more, we will by that virtue.
Exactly.
And like in terms of because we have consciences, and basically we value goodness, and we're wise to value goodness because goodness, basically the definition of goodness is really what creates pleasure in the world. You know, what creates displeasure in general is not good. So so that's why goodness is so important. And when we hold goodness to be very important, and when we consider that it's very important for us to be very good, then we'll work on it, and that'll make it much easier to like ourselves. Again, you know, I mentioned before how even if we might, by society standards or by even our own standards, consider maybe we're not such a good person, we should still strive to like ourselves as much as possible. Nonetheless, since it's so much easier to like ourselves when we are being good, when we're doing good, and when we hold good is very important, we should definitely have that be a great source of our self-esteem.
Yeah, I know this past weekend, with Thanksgiving coming, we had 190 food baskets with turkeys that we gave out to families in need, and a group of people came together, assembled these things, and then delivered all of it this past Saturday, and it felt great. And I think all of our self-esteem was elevated because we knew we were doing good. We were appreciated, but it's a way of connecting to others and increasing self-worth. And I think if you're not in touch with the self-worth, you really can't bring that out into the world. It needs to flow out of you, and if it's not there, it's not going. Where does it come from?
Oh yeah. Another thing that I think needs to be considered is that, as with anything, to like anything in the world, it has to be focused on. And sometimes with self-esteem it's difficult because a lot of times our cultural tradition, our religion, our philosophy tells us to not be self-indulgent.
Right, to focus outside of us.
Right.
Right.
But I mean that, you know, I think what's meant by that is to not be self-concerned or self-absorbed
Consumed.
at the expense of everything else. But on the other hand, I think it's very wise to really be able to focus on ourselves at each moment. Because like focusing really means being in tune with ourselves, being in touch with our emotions, with our feelings, with our thoughts. And the better we get at that, the more we pay attention to what we're thinking, when we're feeling, the more attentive we'll be to the world around us.
That's great. Well said, George. Thanks. This is a great show on happiness and self-esteem. And we want to thank you for tuning in. We hope you tune in next week. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks very much for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life, be good, think well, feel very happy. And I hope you'll join us again next week here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.